going to have the same amount of touches that he would have if he played at another team, but I think he's explosive, and I think he's a great draft pick in the 7th round.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. We oftentimes we will penalize people for the career year, like Raheem Mostert had, capping that brilliant run he had against the Green Bay Packers in the NFC playoffs a couple of years ago. And then if they don't do it, we penalize him as well, right? That he'll never be able to do it. He's a never was, But when they do it, we kind of penalize them as well. So it's a weird, and it's usually not the same people, right? It's usually you're either a Mostert guy or you're not, and you look sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, where I look for the narrative to fit my personal belief on a player or a strategy, which is not great. It's not good process. But we're all just trying to get better. Yeah, exactly. I want to do one more thing. We have Nat Patzke coming up, the 26-time FFPC league champ. I want to talk about one more thing before we get to Nat. Martin Frank on Twitter reported that Jalen Reagor said he's going to play the slot a little bit more in 2021. I always take it with a grain of salt when players talk about their role and when they talk about their injuries and their health, because they tend to exaggerate both of them, how healthy they are and what their role is going to be and how involved they're going to be. Last year, Jalen Reagor, 20% of his targets in the slot, and Greg Ward, if you remember, a guy who used to play quarterback for the Houston Cougars, was actually playing the slot quite a bit for Philadelphia, and he is still on the Eagles roster in 2021. Reagor got caught 7 passes on 11 targets for 33 yards out of the slot in 2020. You'd like to believe that he is going to be more of the field stretcher. Farrell, with guys like Dallas Goedert, and I don't know about Zach Ertz, if he's still going to be on this team, but Devontae Smith is going to catch passes over the middle. I don't know if Reagor in the slot gets me excited to draft him a little bit higher here. Is that what gets you going for Jalen Reagor ADP right now?
I think it should. We got to remember the draft capital that this team put into this player, and there were a lot of teams waiting to choose this player. So I'm not going to say that this player is anywhere near a bust. I think what it does is it gets the 2 best wide receivers on the field. Now you've got 2 really good, explosive wide receivers in Devonta Smith and Reagor. Now Reagor, in a draft that I'm just participating in, went at the end of the 13th round, which based on what should be happening, especially if you're one of the guys that believes in Hurts, then you've got to love the aspect that you can get this guy in a double-digit round. How fascinating it should be that you're having an opportunity to link someone in the 13th round that has this potential. Very few teams can do that, and there's a lot of drafting of these first-round draft picks, wide receivers, second-round draft pick wide receivers, from the 2021 draft. There's a lot of excitement about these guys. You might as well stay excited about Reagor because there's a great potential for him to do it this year.
Draft capital, like you said, Farrell, the name of the game here, going at that 12-13 turn at wide receiver 55, right after Rondale Moore and Darnell Mooney, right ahead of T.Y. Hilton and Cole Beasley. So certainly a guy to take a chance on there. This guy's a first-round pick as a receiver last year in the NFL draft. Certainly having a few shares of him, not the worst way to spend a 13th-round pick. We are going to get to our guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I want to bring him in now. He has 12 Football Guys Players Championship League titles under his belt. He is a champion of 10 high-stakes FFPC Dynasty Leagues, a winner of a pair of FFPC Main Event Leagues, and 2 more satellite leagues to boot. He joins us tonight. Please welcome my friend and my fellow Wisconsinite from God's country, Nat Patzke. Nat, thanks so much for hopping aboard the show tonight, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you are kind of in the shadows of the Twin Cities there in the western side of the state. Are you a Packers guy or are you a Vikings guy?
Yeah, I actually grew up in Menominee, Michigan, which is about 45 minutes north of Green Bay. So I went to Packer games as a kid. This was before Favre was there, so they were still a pretty crummy team, and you could actually go to games. But, yeah, I grew up green and gold. My whole family's a Packer fan base. And I don't know. If I had grown up over here, I have a hard time believing that I would have been a Packer fan because it just seems like I probably would have gone to Vikings games if I lived over here. But everybody in this town, even though I'm right on the border, we're 45 minutes from Minneapolis. the majority of people here are Packer fans, like 99% of them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, good to know. Good to know. Packer Nation bleeding over very close to the Twin Cities. We want to talk fantasy football with you, Nat, for sure. But before we get to that, I do want to have you tell the listeners what you're doing for a living over in western Wisconsin.
I'm a pipe fitter by trade, but I've been an injured reserve since about November. I got a jacked up back, so been dealing with that. But, yeah, pipe fitting.
So when you say you're on injured reserve, are you designated to return at some point, or is this more of a permanent thing for you?
It's kind of a questionable deal right now. I had to have some fusion and part of another disc cut out because it was all calcified from being hurt for so long.
Oh my God!
But I'm trying to get into the more intellectual aspects, little niche of pipe fitting if I can, which I've done a few things to make that avenue an open avenue for me, and hopefully it works out. But I'll find out in about a month.
Well, if your chops are as far as the intellectual portions of pipe fitting, Nat, if your chops are anything like your fantasy football chops there, I think you're going to be just fine. And I think you're going to be excelling here shortly.
Well, yeah, if you're going to pursue intellectual pursuits, Nat, you're going to have to immediately get off the show. We're going to speed this up. Yeah, you're not going to find much. Nat Patzke. I always wanted to have a friend named Nat Patzke. I mean, that is great. That is a central casting right out of Hollywood name. You know, there's not a bar you can walk in the country and introduce Nat Patzke and you're not getting free drinks. I can prove that can happen, Nat. We'll have to do that.
You know, that's happened a lot of times, actually. So. you coming to Las Vegas for the live event, FFPC? Everyone should. They better. I'm definitely going to make my way out there one of these years, but probably not this year yet.
Well, good man. Good man. Well, I tell you what then, since you are familiar with the injured reserve rules in the National Football League, we'll start with a player that last year was challenged in that way too, because I think he played hurt. I think he played very bravely throughout the entire year, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. I went way off chart or ADP or whatever you want to call it in a draft the other night and took him with the 4th overall pick because I hadn't had him anywhere and I was trying to do a little experimenting and I just he's a polarizing player because I think as polarizing as a player can be that has previously been a top 4 pick, now going 8, 9, and 10. How are you handling him in drafts? What do you see forthcoming for this Cowboy this year? Because, frankly, I think a lot of people are giving up on him, saying he's not a guy they're going to draft, and I think that's a mistake.
I'm loving what people are doing because it's making it easy on me. I mean, he obviously looked like he wasn't right last year, whether it was mental or physical, I don't know. But the line was all injured. When Dak got hurt, that's a huge combination of things working against him. And if you just go back to his rookie year, his first preseason when they went and played Seattle, and I don't know if you remember him going and taking on Cam Chancellor, but
yeah,
he hit him with everything he had, and it was the preseason. And I was like, what is going on here? This guy has everything to prove, and he loves it, and he gets up, and he's feed Zeke. I'm like, wow, this guy's going to make it. And, he got his big contract after the whole squabble and everything. And then last year, it's kind of like a perfect storm of things working against him. And I think last year is more of an outlier than anything. He's only 26 years old, and the line's going to be back stronger than they were last year, at least. I won't say stronger than ever, but they should be pretty good. And Dak sounds like he's well on his way to recovery. Everybody's saying he's looking great. I don't think that I don't think I'd put him above where he's currently going, like in that he's kind of going with Derrick Henry, it seems like, in most of the drafts that I've done. But I've taken him 4th or 5th in a few. I can see him beating Kamara very easily. I can see him beating Henry very easily. I see him fighting for the rushing title this year for sure. If he doesn't get hurt, I'm thinking 1,700 yards is not too much to ask, and that's not even including receiving yards.
Yeah, that would be a terrific result.
His ADP, this is interesting because when I was drafting a couple of months ago, I was getting him in the early to mid-second. Now in Football Guys drafts, his ADP has risen. He really hasn't done much, right? He hasn't done anything to like. He's now going as a running back 7 at the 108. Nat Patzke 100% the catalyst for jettisoning Ezekiel Elliott up draft boards right now, going as at the 108. It's right ahead of, or beg your pardon, right behind Derrick Henry, right ahead of Cam Akers. So it makes some sense there that there is some Elliott truthers out there like Nat that are driving up his ADP for sure. And maybe it's still not high enough. We'll have to see how the rest of the offseason goes. It could get higher as we get closer to the start of the NFL season. Jarvis Landry, Nat, was awesome for everybody who drafted him in 2020, given where he was going in drafts. But I look at the other Cleveland receivers on that team, Peoples-Jones, Beckham. I know they drafted the kid out of Auburn, Schwartz. He's on that team. Higgins. Who have you been zeroing in, not named Landry, for the Cleveland Browns wideouts this season?
Beckham's price, if you're a Beckham believer, is unbelievable. I'm not a Beckham believer for this year, but at his price, I mean, if you're on him, I would be buying him hardcore at that price, like 7th round or roughly most of the time I've seen him going. And I think the better bet, just because Beckham's coming off of a serious knee injury, and it seemed like Mayfield started to get the hold of being an NFL quarterback pretty well at the end of last year.
Yep.
I think DPJ is probably a better investment because you can get him in the last round of every draft. And if you're not going that, I would actually say it's not a receiver, it's Austin Hooper, because he's looking like he's 13th, 14th round. And if you look at the tail end of the season, he was getting double digits pretty much every week. And I don't think that's going to change.
There's some changes down in Tampa. They just keep adding good players. And where'd you watch the Super Bowl last year?
In my living room.
I love it. In your living room. Snow on the ground outside there?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Well, we're having a big party in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship on the big game weekend, so I'll ask you to come down. And I enjoyed that Super Bowl. I was a little bit I was on the wrong side of it, and I couldn't get off of it. But I really did think that the Tampa win is the kind of win that we're going to see improved upon this year. Maybe they can even do it again. But, there was a missing piece, and that was the tight end O.J. Howard. And I was watching some of the early games last year. He only played 4 games. He only caught 11 balls, but, man, could he get open. And at times did he look like he was clicking with Brady. There's one film where Brady moves around a little bit, uncharacteristic for Brady in the pocket, and waits for him to get open, and he is wide open in the end zone. So I was thinking that year was going to blossom for him. It didn't because of his injury. What do you think of O.J. Howard this year? And I'm watching it in the drafts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's largely a forgotten man.
Yeah, he's pretty much the last viable tight end option in the majority of the drafts that I've done. It's either him or Ebron as the final 2, I would say. Usually they're about the 15th round, it seems like right now.
Uh-huh.
But I think that's justified because there's just too many weapons in Tampa. When you're talking about watching O.J. Howard at the beginning of last year, I believe that was before Antonio Brown was really in the picture.
Right.
And that Brady's always gone to the smart option on plays, whether it be James White or back in the days of Kevin Falk or whoever. I mean, he's going to go to who he's going to get the smart completion to. He will take his shots, but, I mean, a lot of the times when he was supporting 2 tight ends, it was because they were the best options. It wasn't because he just favors tight ends. Gronkowski's arguably the best tight end ever to play. I would put money on him being the best tight end and it's not just because he was a great receiver.